Hello, welcome to the African Narrative Series, an initiative of Mpuntusem, which aims at documenting significant stories of Africans on the continent and around the world. With me is Dr. Ahmed Bugri. So I wouldn't want to say much about him when the person is here. So without much ado, we'll go straight and let him reveal himself. Dr. Ahmed Bugri, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much indeed.
You have a fascinating background. Theology and the rest, and then you have accounting and then law.
Yes.
You must be a Renaissance man. How do you describe yourself?
Thank you very much, Kwesi, for inviting me to this program. I have always loved learning. I was born in Baku and have lived in Malta for nearly 30 years now.
Amazing.
So when I went to Malta, of course, I had the quest for education.
Okay.
One of the areas, I actually went to Malta through a missionary organization from Malta that came to Ghana.
Okay.
And so when I went, it was a desire to further my education, but also in theology with the aim to become a priest.
Oh.
So
a priest of the missionary group that
so
okay.
when I went there, of course, there was the opportunity to go to university, and for my first choice was to do accounting, because in Ghana I went to St. Thomas Secondary School, went to Big Boss,
okay.
And at that time there were only 3 universities.
Right.
So the opportunity for young people from the north, especially from deprived backgrounds, to enter university was very difficult.
Yeah.
You know, we couldn't afford it, but also the competition was so high. So when I had this opportunity, of course, I took it. And so my first degree was Bachelor of Commerce and Accountancy.
Okay.
And then I went on to do ACCA.
Where did you do that?
At the University of Malta.
Of Malta, okay.
But I began to work as a financial controller for a German company. And
in
then,
Malta?
Yes, in Malta, which was, a pioneering company. But there was this desire to continue to serve God, because my idea of going to Europe was mainly to study theology. So I went to An Sons of God seminary. I went for my undergraduate and went for my master's, and I became, so my major was in missions and biblical languages, both Hebrew and Greek. And then I did my master's in Christian education. So I
you could become an Assemblies of God, all of that.
I was actually ordained as an Assemblies of God pastor, and I became the general secretary of Assemblies of God in Malta for 5 years.
Wow.
So I have pastored in Belgium, I've pastored in Malta, and my work started when the African migration started to come.
Okay, before you come to that, I want us to really go back to how you ended up in Malta. You've mentioned that, of course, you went through the missionary group.
Yes.
But let's look back at your life in Ghana.
Yes.
You were born in Baku. Tell us about growing up, your early years. We want to capture something from those years.
As I told you, I was born up in Baku. I'm a Mpuntusem boy.
Right.
I was born and raised into a Muslim family.
Right.
But I went to St. Thomas Secondary School.
That's even more curious.
Yeah,
so,
I told you.
So your mom was a Muslim?
Yes.
Your dad was a Muslim?
Everybody in my family are Muslim.
How many siblings?
We were 9 siblings.
And you were number?
And I'm the youngest.
How?
I'm the youngest of 9.
How many boys?
We were 8 boys and 1 girl. Unfortunately, my sister passed away last year in Accra. And
so all the 8 boys?
No, not all of them. I think that we are left with now 4 of us only.
Okay.
As you know, in the north, my eldest brother died quite younger. The other brothers also died when they were quite young. So I consider myself as a miracle out of all of this.
So in Baku, you did everything that typical Baku boy would do?
Yes.
When were you born?
I was born in 1966.
Wow.
Yes.
After Nkrumah was overthrown?
Well,
you are not sure.
I'm not sure about the history of...
Which month were you born?
I was born in March.
March. So about a month after Nkrumah was overthrown?
Yes. So I've always followed Ghanaian history with quite very key interest. I'm a person, I did legal anthropology. So anthropology is one of my key subjects. I like to look at ethnicity, I like to look at culture. Actually, my first move out of Baku was from the first conflict of the Baku crisis. But my first, at least my first leaving Baku was to go to Sandema Secondary School. I was actually part of the second batch of students who had gone to Sandema after Sandema Secondary Technical was opened.
So in a way, you were actually displaced from your own community in Baku. You saw that, you witnessed that as a young boy.
Yes.
What sort of impressions did that have on you?
I think that many people underestimate the traumatic experience that many young people from Baku have experienced from this tribal conflict. I can still recollect the first time when we went as young people to burn a house, and I saw actually my best friend's father murdered in front of us. Yeah, so I think that when I hear of the Baku conflict, it brings about very nasty experiences.
You were in your early teens?
Yes, I was in my early teens. I left Ghana actually in January 1989. And I think that it was the beginning of the revolution. Just the first conflict had come. There was a change of government, the PNDC government, when the Boko crisis, started.
So and when you were displaced in this first one, where did you go?
First, I went to Kumasi. I actually worked
with a family.
No. I actually left on my own. Yes, I left on my own, looking for opportunities, and then from a very short stay in Kumasi, I moved to Accra, and it was from Kumasi that I met this group who came from Malta. Yes.
So you were in secondary school.
Yes.
At the time. Yes. The conflict started.
Yes, I think I was in sixth form at that time. Yes.
Okay.
It was my first. I think it was in my lower sixth or my upper sixth.
Okay, and you were the second batch for the Sandema
Secondary Technical
just on the way to Sandema from
from
Tushligan.
Okay. Just before you enter.
Okay, so you are a product from that school.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. I'm going to put a request to you when we are done.
Yes.
Because that school needs.
Yes, I have
that school needs people like.
In fact, I've often wanted to go back and visit the school.
They need a lot of help in terms of facilities and the rest. So we'll talk more about that.
In fact, when I went to the school, there were no lights. We had lanterns.
Yes. At the time.
I don't know if the facilities have changed, but even
they do well.
Even some of the buildings, even some of the buildings were not yet completed. Right. The dining hall wasn't completed yet. Most of the classrooms we had sat in weren't completed. Even the dormitories where we were staying weren't completed. And I remember that we used to actually take water from the septic tank, from the rainfall water to wash. And there was only one borehole that we used to walk and carry water for our prefect and carry water for yourself. So Sandema has been part of my life.
So you did Form 1 to Form
5. And then,
5 years of your life.
Yes,
you would go to boarding school.
Yes.
So vacation, where were you? Come back to Baku?
I would come back to Baku, and sometimes I would stay with my uncles in Bolga. Yes, I had two uncles who were pharmacists.
Okay.
And one of them actually lives in Accra at the moment. Right. And because my parents weren't able to take care of me, I used to live with my uncle. Sometimes I went to Tamale because my uncle also was Ahmed Bugri, who lived in Tamale at that time as a medical doctor.
Okay.
So I would go from these families during the holidays.
Okay. Did your quest for learning come out of your relationship with your uncle?
I believe that they were role models. When they came to Baku, we saw how influential they were. When I went to visit their children, I saw them living in a bungalow. And I think that these impressions stay on you, and you say, no, I also want to become like
better.
that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Of course, one of the challenges when you are young, growing up in Ghana or say most African cities, and your parents are illiterate and you have educated uncles or aunties, is they forget to see the impact that they are having on others. And I can say something that when I was growing up, I was very curious for learning.
Right. Even in Baku before you started.
Even in Baku, but because I had no opportunities, you always lacked that counseling, that kind of person-to-person intervention from an early age. And sometimes when I go to Baku, I see young people who are very intelligent.
But misguided.
Or they don't have the guidance. And that's a shame, because most of these young people will turn their curiosity for learning into delinquency.
Exactly.
It leads you to hopelessness. It leads you to look at a way to survive. And so at a very young age, you become very susceptible to influence, either to crime or either to drugs or to violence. And I think that is one of the most issues that we face in Baku, where young people are being influenced into violence.
And by virtue of that, it becomes so easy to use them to perpetrate all these the violence and you nearly fell for that.
Oh, and I think that during my early ages, I have been through that. I have been through that, and I believe that God saved me from that. I think that was also what led me also to a spiritual curiosity to become a Christian, although my coming to become a Christian was because I received a miracle in my own life of healing.
What was that? What sort of
I used to stammer. So actually at secondary school in Sandema that I received the Lord.
Really?
Yes, I became a Christian.
So your stammer just...
My stammering stopped, and that was how I became a Christian.
Okay, tell us about that.
Through Scripture Union.
So you went first year, second year, you were stammering.
I was nearly in my 5th year when a friend of ours from the Scripture Union, from the school union, invited me to attend one of their prayer meetings. You know,
Were you still a Muslim?
Yes. And in one of the prayer meetings, I actually gave I gave a challenge, and I actually mockingly, I didn't believe that this was something which was real. Right. It was, yes, I was a Muslim, my family are Muslims, and everybody's a Muslim, but if I become a Christian, it could become a problem. Yeah. Right. But then I went to this prayer meeting, and lo and behold, while they were praying, they laid hands on me, they prayed with me, and I became healed. So it was my spiritual journey. Somehow, because of that healing process, I became a Christian. So my family became alien to me somehow because I had to grow.
You had moved.
So the church became one of my main contact points and families from that point on.
Even your uncles?
Some of my uncles who has moved out of Baku they have some sort of Christian backgrounds. Right. But I was living in Baku because my roots were there. Definitely. Yeah, and that's how it led me out of Baku. And I think that people underestimate this first leaving of where you are. Once you leave your town, once you leave your parents, your friends, and you move even to Bolga, or you move to Tamale, or you move to Accra, it becomes a foreign land. That's why many African young people can adapt very easily when they go abroad, because leaving your own people and your language,
it's something with
it's learning a new culture, learning a new language. Right. So it was very easy for us, or usually many African people, to leave and to adapt very quickly, because your resilience of having to adapt into a new culture is there. And most of the reasons why many northern young people leave is for these opportunities.
Right, and there were also, of course, the push factors. In your case, there was the religious aspect of it, where you had become a non-conformist in this case, therefore, more or less an outcast in your family.
Yes.
And then also the fact that you had to more or less move away from the violent situations there.
Yes.
And perhaps the religious aspect got you on more. Leaving Baku to Accra, which year was this? And what were you coming to do? You said the missions were now sponsoring you?
After my sixth form, I did my...
Sixth form was where, Navrongo?
No, Bolgatanga.
Yeah,
Big Boss. Yeah. Okay. Actually, after I left Big Boss, I did my national service in Kumasi. So I began to work.
You worked or you taught?
I worked.
Okay. So your sixth form was what? What were the courses you took for sixth form?
I did business studies. So
okay. So all this while you'd been...
Yeah,
okay.
so accounting, economics, I had always wanted to do accounting.
Okay.
That's why accounting was the first
thing,
the first
practical
passion
thing you had to do.
that I had
Yes.
done.
Okay.
Yes, so when I went to Accra, I began to actually work.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it was through this working that you gain your own independence, you rent your own room, because you don't have a family wherever you are going. So you have to struggle to make up your ends meet. So I began to work in Kumasi until I moved and I met this mission group and I left. I think I went to Kumasi in 1988,
Okay.
just after Alexi, sixth form.
And then the following year, you decided to leave Ghana.
Yes, I left.
Why? Of course, you've explained you wanted to become a missionary, but they could have also trained you here, couldn't they have?
They could have, but I think that also there is a curiosity for every young Ghanaian to be able to go abroad because of the opportunities abroad brings.
Right.
Yeah, you have this sense of saying, I want to also go and see what is there.
Okay, so the decision to go to Europe was basically because you had contact with a missionary group that was interested in training you to become a pastor.
Yeah.
Is it the Assemblies of God?
A priest, no.
A priest.
Yeah, a Catholic group, yeah.
Oh, actually, is that the case?
Yes.
So
Now,
you joined a religious congregation?
no, I didn't join it. When I became a Christian from a Muslim background,
Yes.
denominations don't make any sense.
Of course, they don't. Definitely.
So,
they don't.
so in
They
fact,
don't.
I've been baptized in the Presbyterian church. I was baptized in the Baptist church. I was baptized in different churches.
So which group was this?
It was a Roman Catholic
No,
group.
I know. What was the name of the...
It was called the International Catholic Program on Evangelization.
Ah, that program.
Yeah,
Which took... Okay.
yeah.
All right.
So
All right.
so they came, and at that time I was part of a non-denominational group.
That had to be
so,
trained, yeah.
but which was also charismatic.
Right.
Yeah, and so this was one of the reasons why. But I can tell you that the reason why I had to leave Ghana
Right.
were mainly two reasons. When you're growing up as somebody from the north, a deprived area, who looks for opportunities to progress, and you don't have, any person becomes an opportunity.
Right.
You know, so that was one of the things. The second part of it is you are always wanting to settle down in your own capacity as a person. Yeah, the traumatic experiences of growing up without guidance
Right.
from deprivation is quite stronger, and I think that this is why many of my colleagues, when I went to Ghana, have left Ghana.
Okay.
They've actually gone
Because
even
there were no
maybe to the
opportunities
yes
at the time.
at the time. Yeah,
And as I
so,
said, this
yeah.
obviously cuts across the continent.
No, it's
And not just
yeah.
the continent, but perhaps other continents as well. But really,
Everywhere in Africa,
yes.
you know, I've now been privileged to work with thousands of African young people who are leaving Africa also for opportunities in Europe.
In Europe, yes.
So, but for me, it was mainly because I wanted to study, and
Right.
that
improve upon
and that going abroad gave me that opportunity to study, and it did happen that I was able to study. So the first thing I took was studying.
So, which month did you leave?
I left in January.
January.
Yes, I remember
1989.
89. 21st of January 1989, I arrived in Italy. I remember that.
You
day.
went by.
I went by air.
By air. Okay.
DC, the DC jet that is now parked outside
Yes. Now it's
Accra
now
as
a restaurant.
a restaurant. Actually, I went to eat in it.
So that's the one that took you out.
Yeah, you know.
All right. So
Yes.
you arrived in Italy.
Yes, I arrived in Rome, spent
Rome,
some
yes.
months in Rome.
Okay,
before-
because it was a Catholic religious
Yes, before I
program.
went to Malta and I did my training.
Okay,
Yes.
and how long was the training?
I did my training in this place for 1 year,
Right.
and then I began to study for another 4 years.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was the bit about theology.
Yes,
Yeah,
and then I left, and
the philosophy.
Yeah,
and all that.
yeah.
Yes. Okay. You decided not to be a priest,
yes.
and then what next? Because that's what really took you there.
Yeah, the reason was, in Europe at that time, Roman Catholicism in Europe and Roman Catholicism in Africa are two different things.
Definitely.
The church, Roman Catholic Church in Europe, is very traditional. I came from a very charismatic, non-denominational background. So you feel like fish out of water. That was number one. Living also in a convent with older priests as a young person, discourages you.
Right. And at the time you went,
Yeah.
how many, you, apparently, and I want you to really confirm this, there were only 3 people who were blacks on the whole island of Malta, true?
Oh, there were I think probably were only 2 people.
2 blacks on the whole island
Yes.
of Malta?
Most people came and left. Actually, Malta was being used as a transit, but people who lived there, I mean, if I was the first black person to get married into the village of my wife.
Wow.
Yeah. So at that time, you could count the black people in your hands. Probably were 2 or 3 people at that time.
How did that make you feel? You easily adjusted because you had
That's what I'm telling you. It is not because I was able to leave Baku and go and live in Kumasi, had to learn broken tree, and go to Accra and not speak any Ghana. Then you can live anywhere.
Anywhere. Great.
Yeah. You learn to adapt. Of course, living in Malta as a black person at that time, people look at you as an object of charity.
Were they racist?
Not necessarily racist, but you are treated as if you've come
you are
here. You are something. Yeah. So
somebody who has to be taken care of.
Yeah.
And here you were in a seminary going to.
Yes.
Yeah, that's quite interesting.
But that is the view that many Europeans would look at an African. You have nothing, so you've come here.
You've come to become
get something. It's a shame, but that's the perception.
And then of course those you lived in a religious community with, because they were older people, also looked at you some way.
You face the same way.
The same way.
And I think that it was part of the issue also that led me again to move on.
Definitely.
Yeah?
Exactly, because you couldn't.
Number one, I wanted to have a family because I had left a family.
Right.
Being a priest makes you assess. And the good thing is that they give you time to assess whether you want to truly become or not. And I have met some people who have become priests because they want a kind of an education. It offers them
and eventually they ended up becoming priests when they had no business becoming priests.
In my case, there was this opportunity to evaluate.
Right.
Do you really have this calling? You know, and deep inside me, it was no. I want to have a family. You know, but I also want to continue also to do what I've come here to do. And even though I became an accountant and work, that desire to actually work as a person of the church became more.
Right.
So I transitioned from being a priest into going into a Pentecostal seminary. Because in Malta, once you go into seminary, then you are going to become a priest. The studies lead you into the priesthood, except from an evangelical theological facility. So it was a very good thing that I could study theology in an evangelical Pentecostal school and choose to become a pastor. And that's actually what I became. I became a pastor.
Of the Assemblies of God?
Yes.
Okay, great. At what point did you find a lot of Africans coming to that part of the world, Malta? At what point?
Yeah.
And how did that make you feel when you realized that there were a lot of Africans coming over? Because I want us to go into your work in migration and the kind of continental dialogue we can have around it.
So when I finished my studies, I did my theological studies in Belgium, because schools in Belgium. I did my work there. Now I had the opportunity to go to Sweden and pastor an international church. Or I had the option to go back to Malta. But because I was a Muslim, I had always wanted to work with North African Muslims. Mm-hmm. So I went back to Malta to work in Malta. But also we had a missionary friend of ours who was the pastor, and he asked me to come and cover for him to go back to the States, that he can come back and then continue. So I said, okay, this is a very good opportunity for me to go to Libya and to teach and train pastors, because my master's was in Christian education. So I wanted, most of the African churches in Europe do not have educated pastors. So I had this desire to train. So when I went back to Malta, actually that's how I met Reverend Asori, who had just passed away as president. So I began to help. In 2001 was the beginning of the coming of boats to Europe through Malta. Yeah, and the reason is that Malta was preparing to enter the European Union.
Right.
Malta, as a Commonwealth country, always received African people, but they always came through and they went somewhere else.
Okay.
They used Malta as a stepping stone to the UK or to Germany or to other countries. But because Malta had to implement the Schengen rules, Malta became the southern border. So they were preparing to close the border. And it was also the beginning of the rumblings of Libya and the disquiet with Gaddafi. So you began to see many young people leaving, and the only way they could leave was by boat. They got stuck at sea, some of them died, and they were rescued. Now, Malta is between Libya and southern Sicily, so we are right in the middle of the Mediterranean. And the search and rescue area of Malta stretches from Malta all the way to just few nautical miles of Sicily, of Libya, and of Italy. So most of the boats which were stranded at sea were saved by our by our army, and they were brought in. Now, in the early 2000s, Malta had a detention policy, which was if you arrived on the island without any migration papers, you were detained for 18 months. So between 2001 and 2004, there were over 6,000 Africans from Ghana, Nigeria, Burkina Faso, who were sitting down in detention centers. Wow. That is how I got involved. So first, instead of going to Libya, we began to go to these detention centers to train in the language. So I will take in newspapers, I will take in salt, I will take in pepper, because the Africans didn't know how to eat pasta without pepper. So they would refuse the food. So there was conflict in this detention centers.
And they couldn't understand.
And they couldn't understand why. So I became a mediator. The government of Malta called me to come and mediate.
Wow.
But also being a pastor, I began to have Bible study groups in these detention centers. Because for me, education was a tool to empowerment of these people. Most of them came from Brongahafo region, Drobo, Brekum. So, but also, I also began to see many black people, because I was one of the few black people. Suddenly you see black people, but they were in detention.
Okay, not as free as,
not as free.
Connected as.
Secondly,
as you were, yes.
The discussion about migration from Africa frightened people in Europe. They saw it as an invasion of black people. They were not used to dealing with black people. So there was the beginnings of racism and xenophobia speaking in the media. So I practically got involved because I was an African, and because people came and told me there were people in the detention centers. I didn't even think of law at that time. So when I began to deal with people, most of them were Ghanaians. I actually would want, before that time, I used to work with Ghanaians in prison. Now,
in Malta?
In Malta.
Okay.
This was a phenomenon that many Ghanaians will carry drugs as drug mules. So if you saw...
And they ended up on the...
Yes, in prison. If you saw an African in Malta, you would see the person, a Ghanaian. Most of them were prisoners.
Wow.
So I would go there as a chaplaincy to work with them. Now there were these people who were not criminals, who were also sitting down in detention centers. So we created a program. Because after 18 months, these people were released into the community.
Oh, okay.
Now, they will come out and they are stuck because Malta is an island. They couldn't go anywhere. They wanted to proceed to other European countries, but they couldn't. So, most of them developed mental health issues. Wow. Some of them committed suicide. Wow. They wanted to work, but they had no skills, because in Libya, they were working as laborers.
Right.
And Malta is a very highly skilled society. That is how we formed our foundation, because one of the ways to take people out of poverty in Europe, especially African diaspora, is through education. So this is the changing of the narrative. Then I began to work in the open center. So what the government did was that when you spend your 18 months in detention, you were put in an open center.
Right.
So I went to help in these open centers.
Okay.
And for the first time, the government mandated me to operate and to run an open center. Because I told the government, the only way to avoid this conflict, to avoid this
the
demonstration,
chaos.
is to create a program of education and rehabilitation to get these people into the job market. Because the reason why they were coming was to work
economic.
and to remote and to transmit money back home.
Okay.
If they don't have that, then the country will have a problem and racism would increase. That is how I went to law school then, because I realized that
you set up which organization?
we set up the Foundation for Shelter and Support to Migrants.
How many
which
were you? 4 of you?
we were six Africans.
Africans.
Yes, so I called the migrants themselves.
Oh, I see.
Yes, one from Ghana, one from Somalia. We had a person from Mali, myself, and a Maltese man. We set up this because I wanted the Africans to feel empowered.
Right.
And to feel that they were part of this process of their own integration. So we formed this foundation, and that is how I went back to law school, because I realized...
You actually decided to go to law school.
Because there was no lawyer who could understand the Africans and the migrants, and there was no lawyer who was willing. No lawyer was willing, because they didn't understand the culture, social cultural background. There was also discrimination. If you dealt with an African person, no Maltese client will come to you.
Wow.
Because they saw it as an invasion.
So at this stage, your quest for knowledge was still insatiable.
Yes.
And then because you had come up from a background of wanting to be a missionary,
Yeah.
it all transferred into this.
Exactly.
And you had settled, you had your children and all.
In fact, until today, I see my legal work as a mission.
Wow. I didn't know that's
Yes. I
but,
actually see my work even within institutions.
right. So you went back to school to study law.
Yes, I actually went back to school when I was 40 years of age.
Wow.
So I went there to study basic migration law and asylum. The rector of the university told me, Ahmed, you are one of the persons, at that time, because Malta is very small, I had become very, very well known.
Of course.
Because
you were famous.
You
were famous.
I was a mediator. If there was any trouble, I would go and sit down. You know how Africans do things, and negotiate and pray.
Right.
Being a pastor was very helpful, because I could enter into any violent situation and deal with the situation. Plus, when you begin to work with people and they trust, so I brought in other missionaries from Germany, from other places.
Right.
And so we gave blankets, we gave food, we trained people, we discussed mental health issues, we took their grievances, and I took it to the government minister. We would discuss. So I became a link between the government, but not only as a government, but also with the migrant groups themselves.
Wow. And
this, the University of Malta told me, why don't you just do some legal? I told them, I'm a pastor. Why should I become a lawyer? So I actually went to university for 3 months. Did very well. Did my LLB. Did my postgraduate. Became a notary public and did my PhD.
Wow.
In constitutional law. Actually, my thesis in my PhD dealt with racism, whether the Maltese constitution had adequate protection for other races. Because in Malta, the law did not foresee many people coming from other places. So
they were just supposed to be
it was a groundbreaking study. Once I did that, in every conference of migration in the EU, in Malta, I became part of it. Actually, I wrote the paper for the Valencia Summit on the migration issues between African Union and Malta.
Wow.
Yeah, so it became a field of expertise.
Wow.
But I still pastored the church. So I became a lecturer at the University of Malta, I became a lecturer in other universities in Europe. And so I just continued to develop my academics. So I became an academic in terms of applying theology to law.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I see religion,
so spiritual foundations of law.
Yes.
Instead of
because
talking about religion.
For me, the foundations of human rights
Right.
is that everybody is created in the image of God,
yes.
and has inalienable rights, but also responsibilities.
The imago Dei.
Yes. So if you look at law, so because I was a New Testament scholar,
Right.
if you read Paul's writings, they were legal. Redemption
Right.
is a legal term.
So you must have done a lot of Greek.
Yes. I can read and write Greek.
Very well.
Yeah. So that just led my. So somehow.
And so law even became
And so
easier.
law became easier because, for me, the protection of the fundamental right of a person is very sacrosanct. You know, and so I carried that now into constitutional law, and I began to lecture. Actually, I lectured business ethics and corporate social responsibility, and I look at how European trade policies in Africa and how multinationals in Africa have caused to this migration and movement of people.
Okay. Just to wind
Yeah.
down on the conversation,
Yeah.
the work you started with the
foundation.
foundation, how far is it? What are some of the key things? Of course, you've narrated
Yeah.
elements of it and how you ended up going into law and
Yeah.
be able to. What are some of the significant things you've done? And then in terms of your recognition in Maltese society,
Yeah.
and then also the continent of Europe and Africa,
Yeah.
particularly Africa, because, and by the way, this conversation is actually being held at the headquarters of the African Union. So,
Yeah.
and this year we are looking at migration issues and
Yeah.
all of that, and
Yeah.
that's why you are very integral in this whole process.
Yeah. Yeah.
The idea is, where are you now?
Yes.
Where are we going?
Okay. Let me talk about Malta. In Malta, we created a reception system
Okay.
that looked at the African culture and their reintegration in the society of Europe. Actually, the Master Open Center, which was the center that I was running, became a best practice in the whole of Europe. And the policies and the procedures that we have set have become the trademark of many European agencies.
In dealing with migrants from Africa.
In dealing with migrants from Africa. Because you have to take the socio-cultural context of a person into play when you are trying to integrate the person. So we looked at three things. Number one, education, employment, and health.
Right.
Most of young African people leaving Africa into Europe, although the causes may be conflict, it may be anything, underlying it is economics. I want to be able to support my family.
Right.
And once you leave and go abroad, people are thinking that you should be or you must be a contributor to the family back home. So what we did was, instead of putting people in centers to sit down, you educate. So we developed since I did my master's in Christian education, I developed a curriculum in language learning. So cultural orientation, language learning, which are key tools to employment.
Which language are those?
Maltese language, which can be adapted also into any language. And we tried this by building a private university in Albania.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was involved in a mission organization. Actually, we bring African young people from Africa and train them in this university, which is a mission-run university. From kindergarten to secondary school to university, and now we also have a master's program. For me, education is a key to a person's development.
Right.
And once that happened, I was one of the first Africans, or the only African, to be knighted, to be given the National Medal of Honor in Malta. So
That's record.
Yeah.
You've been famous.
Yes. And I was also to lead the delegation of the Maltese president to Accra, Greece, just 2 years ago. I was actually one of the persons who had worked with His Excellency for this trip. And I was in Ghana with the president of Malta in the delegation. Wow. Secondly, I am one of the
So you're a knight of Malta?
Yes. And so
what is your title?
It's called the MQR.
Yes.
It's called Il Medaglia al-Ari tal Repubblica. You know, a medal for the work of the honor of the Republic.
Wow.
Yeah. And I also had the privilege to also work with the American Embassy, and I go to the US to train people. So I'm part of the IVLP program, and this year I was nominated as the alumni of the State Department, and I received a prize for social innovation.
African countries where you've had your impact.
Yes.
In Ghana, what did you do apart from coming with the?
Ghana, I was part of the team that helped develop both the migration policy and the diaspora.
The diaspora policy.
Yes, I've done the same thing during the post-Valletta consultation. That's how I got part of the African Union. I've worked in literally every African country in terms of supporting a migration dialogue between Africa and Europe. That's my expertise. My expertise is European migration law and asylum.
What do we do moving forward? Because the push-out factors are not gone.
Yeah.
There are still conflicts around the continent.
Yeah.
There's still irresponsible leadership.
Yes.
There's still economic hardships.
Yeah.
Extreme youth unemployment.
Yeah.
And Bill Gates was a while ago talking about, and this narrative, we keep talking about the fact that Africa is the next, in terms of generational, whatever, we have the numbers.
Yeah.
But the numbers we have are not equipped enough, and so they feel that whilst they are home suffering, they see some vision of some, like honey and, something sweet somewhere. They want to go for greener pastures. What do we do moving forward?
You have used the right word, equipment. I have seen young people from Tamale, from Brekum, from Drobo, who have come to Malta as illiterates. They learn to plaster. Today they have married home. They've sent their brothers to university, working, picking garbage.
Wow.
Europe offers opportunity to young people. But you see, Ghana has the same opportunity. When I come to Accra, I see opportunity everywhere. It is harnessing this opportunity. What is lacking in Accra is the skill to match the opportunity. Many of these young people who are in Europe are able to enter the labor market very easily. Even if they are plasterers, they are able to get jobs as plasterers.
Because they have the skills.
Exactly.
They have
I go to Accra and you have many, many buildings. You call these POP people. I know people who came to Malta with no skill in POP. Today, they are their own contractors. And yet,
in Malta.
And yet they have no status. Yet they have no legal papers to live.
Wow.
Ghana needs these people. But what is the opportunity? So I believe that the way forward for Africa in dealing with this issue is to go away from intellect into skill acquisition. And that is what I, as an African diaspora, I'm interested in coming back to Ghana or Africa. Why? Because in Europe you learn skill. You learn not only to have a book, but you learn to apply.
Right.
You learn to look at things in a different way. And I think that this is the thing that our governments have to look at. How can we harness the youth? When I go to Accra and also the north, and I see people carrying water, how much is the capital? $100 maybe, even less. They walk on the streets every day, and yet they are able to live on it. I was able to meet someone who bought a computer, was able to go to a cafe somewhere in Labone and is trading online. What if we build a school? How much does it cost to buy a laptop? 2,000 euros, nothing. You build a place where you train people who are doing designing, who have never handled a computer, to be able to translate that into design. That's a skill. Once they put a design, Accra alone is the market. What about Kumasi, Tamale? The service industry in Ghana is waiting to be developed. I was recently in Kokrobite Beach,
right,
and I looked at this virgin beach, and I'm going, this is millions of euros of money.
Yeah.
Who are the ones developing it? Maybe the concession is given to a foreigner.
Yes, most definitely.
Not lack of disrespect to a foreigner. I'm a person living in a foreign land. But how many Ghanaians are able to harness the natural resources of Ghana? But this is also one of our problems. We want to get rich quick. We don't want to go through the process. So I think that our education system has to look back in going away from degrees from sociology, which used to be going towards government employment now.
Yes, but the whole thing is a remnant of is a colonial legacy, and we sit, for instance, the African Union. We've been talking about this back and forth. We are so theoretical almost everywhere. We know the problems. We know very well that we need skills to be able to bridge or to be able to save our young people from moving across border. We know, but we lack the integrity to be able to actually move away from an educational system that does not serve us.
But I think also that I can probably talk about Ghana in the least time that I've come back. Ghana is heavily dependent on the public sector. Although the economy is driven by the private sector.
Even the private sector relies on government contracts.
But the average person who sits at the market, at Circle, and he's shouting, shoes.
Those entrepreneurs.
The bars conduct, they are the engine of the Ghanaian economy. How do you harness that for skill development? I was in Baku. My brother's son wants to learn how to drive. He has to be a driver mate. He has to leave Baku and go to Tamale and go to a driving school. There is nothing concrete. So we should look at doing this in a practical way. And I think that this is where the private sector is key. There are so many project funding. Last year, Africa lost 800 million euros at tapping into financial instruments from the EU because no government institution puts in a project. Everybody is sitting down for donations.
Maybe they didn't know how to even do the proposal.
That is it. Therefore, this is why the diaspora is key, because we have lived in these places. We have the knowledge. I run my foundation purely based on project proposals. In over how many years we have run projects into tens of millions of euros. That skill can be brought. But if you go to a government department, you have a department that has one person sitting on a desk. And how can he deal with his European counterparts who have expertise in everything? So we need to have a partnership between private, public sector, but also I think that the welcoming of diaspora also is key.
Very well. Still moving forward, key things you recommend for the African Union and for governments across the continent in dealing with migration issues. Of course, migration has its benefit, and you have proven, beyond doubt that sometimes it actually helps to go do something. But even though you may not come back, you can still look back and help.
You always come back.
You always come back.
We are recommending to the African Union to look at secular migration. Africa needs its young people, but it doesn't have the framework to retain them. Therefore, you have to look at not just policy, but to look at the civil society partners to be engaged in giving things to people. African Union has the opportunity to enter into partnership with the European Union. There are so many project issues that many of our leaders are not doing.
And in terms of the circular migration, to get some young Africans over there in Europe to get trained and come back, or what would be the modalities around that?
But European people come to Africa for internships.
Exactly. So
why not
just the other way around? Exactly.
That's what we're saying.
Exactly.
If you want to go abroad and do your master's, do your PhD, you should be able to go. Once you get the skill, you always want to go back and do something and so circular migration is something that we have looked for even within the context of the Global Compact of Migration, which was adopted in Marrakesh. I happen to be very fortunate that I'm one of the legal panel of experts in this instrument. And it's just practical. When a Ghanaian comes to me and tells me, Uncle, what can I do? I ask him, what can you do?
Right.
He comes up with a big project. I need to buy a taxi. And I I tell him, if I give you 100 euro.
Yes, what would you do with it?
What will you do with it? If you can't do something with 100 euros, then if I give you 1 million, you can.
Definitely.
Very, very soon, you get the person unemployment, and the person within 3 months becomes independent. You give the person a course, electricity course. I know a Ghanaian guy who came to Malta. He could barely speak English. Francis. He went, I told him, go and take English. Go and take Maltese. He went and learned English. He did small courses in electricity. Today, he has a company which installs air conditions. He has no O levels. Yes. It doesn't take much. It is not the money, it is the ideas. This guy is now employing other Ghanaians now in his own company. And that's what I told people in Accra. If government should bring back returnees and give them the government maintenance contract, what will they do? Right. So let's go from policy to practice. It is simple.
Let's move away from the theory.
Yeah.
I mean, just this ivory tower, towerism and all of them come to the ground.
I am actually going to come to Accra and probably set up a center for diaspora engagement and policy implementation. There are many Ghanaian...
on migration.
Yes, which is migration.
Yes.
There are many Ghanaian young people who want to return back to Ghana, but they are afraid.
Why?
They are afraid because if they come, will they succeed? The frame is not there. So to encourage such young people to come back, you have to harness their skills and they can become employable. So what we are doing now is contacting companies in Accra. I was once with Chada, telling him, okay, if you have got projects, give them contracts. Ghana actually doesn't have. A friend of mine came from Malta to create a company in Accra, a tailoring company. He has problems finding tailors. I mean, that is an irony.
Interesting. So we'll talk about more of your exploit in subsequent editions.
Yeah.
And we are grateful that you've taken the time to share your life experiences, your knowledge and experience, I mean, everything you've been doing. By the way, do you speak Maltese?
Yes.
You rattle. I mean, are you better?
I speak Maltese.
Better than English, or which is?
No. I speak English better. I speak Maltese, but I speak English better.
Yes. This has been the African Narrative Series, an initiative of Mpuntusem to document the significant stories of Africans on the continent and around the world. Actually, also towards the Agenda 2063 of the African Union. And this interview has come. We're actually doing it right in the headquarters of the African Union in Addis-Ababa on the side of the 32nd Summit of the African Union. And our guest, of course, has been Dr. Ahmed Bugri. How do I describe him? A philosopher, theologian, lawyer. I'm sure you have some other skills that I'm not. A negotiator, a legal drafter, and what else? A philanthropist, a pastor. And a pastor. How could I have forgotten this?
Yes.
So, Dr. Ahmed Bugri.
Yes.
Thank you very much for spending time with us.
And thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure.